And that's the universal intelligence. Innate is just a subset of anything that's alive that's basically in a constrained space and time domain that basically is part of the universal intelligence. The universal intelligence is the perfect symmetry of the universe. And the intelligence, the term intelligence, according to William James, is basically the pursuit of something meaningful and purposeful in life. And life is teleological in that respect. It has some meaning and purpose that we put onto things. It's not a meaningless universe when human beings come in and they add meaning to their life. And the difference between an animal and a human is the ability to go not for just pleasure and avoid pain, but to have meaning and to find the mean between the two polarities simultaneously. Thousands of years ago, we were more nomadic. We lived as a generalist, not a specialist. There was no division of labor. Everybody did whatever they did to survive out there. But slowly but surely, they started to live in families, and then kinship, and then township, and then, little towns, and then cities and states and nations, and now global. And as they did, classes developed and divisions of labor developed, and then you became more specialized because it was more efficient, but at the same time you became more dependent on other people for its survival. I depend on a lot of people to survive because I'm useless outside my area of core competence. And so as a result of that, the fear of being rejected by those people you depend on makes it where you don't want to ruffle the feathers of people because you could be, abandoned or exiled from the group and not survive very well. So I think there's an instinct inside us, an impulse to be fitting in and an instinct to avoid not fitting in that makes us frightened of being different. But yet, how many would agree that deep inside there's a part of you that has a desire to make a difference? It's pretty universal. I spoke in a prison at Krugersdorp prison in South Africa, and I spoke to the wardens and all the staff, 400 of them, and then we went 3 stories underground to a maximum security prison where people have 25 years to life sentences. They were the drug dealers, the rapists, the killers, or whatever. And I walked in, and we had Al Jazeera television station filming, and I had the warden and 6 guards, and we walked in the holding room, and then we walked in the room, and there's a sea of 1,000 orange uniforms in there. And I walked up and had to stand on a little plastic stool about 1.5 feet so I could see everybody's head because they couldn't see me. Some of them were taller than I was. And I asked the room, first statement, how many of you, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you've experienced, deep down inside in your heart have a desire to want to make a difference? And within 1/1000th of a second, every hand went up. So it's innate within us to want to contribute, but we can't make a difference fitting in. We can only make a difference standing out. So we have to be clear enough on our mission to transcend the fear of rejection. Because if we're letting the fear of rejection stop us from our mission, we're going to hold ourselves back from our mission. I get told that, how many agree that everybody around you is projecting their values onto you and trying to get you to fit into their value system, and they're opportunists usually. And they're telling you ought to, you're supposed to, you should, you got to, you have to, you must. They're using imperative language imposed onto you. But I don't live by should and ought to and supposed to and got to and have to and must. I live by what I love doing, what I'm inspired to do, what my voice and vision on the inside is calling me to do, which is there to make a difference. And when that is stronger than the opinions on the outside, you master your life. So first they will ridicule you, they will violently oppose you until you become self-evident if you stay with something. I got to share a story. When I was 18, And I was starting to go to that Wharton Junior College to start school after I failed that class. I started carpooling with this other guy who was an engineer. And he and I would talk about each other's dreams. He said, I am going to build the fastest magnetic trains ever built in history, which he went on to do. And I told him, I'm going to travel and step foot on every country on the earth, and I'm going to share and teach, and I'm going to be involved in healing. And we were talking, and we were both engaged in our dreams. And one day, a friend of his asked if he could get a carpool and ride. And he was this rich kid, that kind of an arrogant little guy that you had to deal with. And he's sitting in the back, and we were telling each other our dreams and sharing it. And he says to me, yeah, DeMartini, you're going to work in a cotton gin. Get real, dude. Nobody from this small town does anything. We end up coming back here working at the cotton gin. And I didn't like that. He's raining on my parade. So we decided not to let him ride with us anymore, because we were wanting to build momentum towards our dream. I was 18 at the time. 2 years ago, I was doing a podcast on Zoom, and my South African office gets the blogs and posts that people put while you're doing the talk. I'm just on my ship just doing my thing, And all of a sudden, this guy sends a post in and says, is that the DeMartini from Richmond, Texas? And I saw his name, and I didn't forget his name. And I went, wow. I got tears in my eyes. I said, that is it. It's great to hear from you. Wow, a blast from the past. I haven't heard from you since I was 18. And he sends another post in. You fucking did it, man. Congratulations. I broke down in tears because I remember what he said. And they first ridicule you. They can violently oppose you, as Gandhi said. But if you stay with something, they eventually rally around you and pretend like they've always dreamed in you, believed in you. So don't let the immediate hindrance stop you from a long-term vision. Don't let somebody who doesn't see it, who is intimidated by your dream, who want to bring you down into mediocrity, stop you from a vision. And don't judge yourself relative to somebody else's values. You never make a mistake in your own values. You only think you make a mistake when you compare your actions to somebody else's values. None of you have a fear of speaking, because I saw you speaking at the table. But you'll have a fear of speaking in front of somebody you think is more intelligent than you, more successful than you, has more wealth than you, has a more stable relationship than you, more socially connected to you, more physically fit than you, or more spiritually aware than you. The second you make a comparison between you and somebody else, instead of a comparison between your actions and your own highest values, you automatically distracted yourself from your genius. We're not here to put people on pedestals or pits. We're here to put them in a heart and have reflective awareness, have equanimity and authenticity in ourselves, and equity between ourselves and others, and see that whatever we see in them, we have in us. And not diminish ourselves thinking they have something we don't. They have it in their values, not our values. I had a doctor who contacted, a chiropractor, a number of years back. He says, Dr. DeMartini, I want to have you hired to help me become successful. And I said, fantastic. And I asked him a question, where are you successful? He said, Dr. DeMartini, you're not understanding. I'm not successful. I want to be successful. I said, great. You're not understanding my question. Where are you successful? He said, Dr. DeMartini, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not. I want to be successful. And you keep asking me, where am I successful? And I said, yes. You're not understanding me. Answer my question. You want me to help you? Answer my question. Where are you successful? Where are you achieving what you set out to achieve? He stopped and he reflected. He goes, okay, I have an amazing relationship with my wife. We've been together for 10 years. It's extraordinary. I really love this woman. And compared to what I see in many other people, we really have a blessed relationship. I said, great. Where else are you successful? Okay. I have a son who's 10, and I'm the coach, and we're going to win the pennant, I think, this summer. And that's something we set out to. And it's very inspiring to see my son and I win this thing together. We're going to win. I said, great. Where else are you successful? Well, our mother-in-law lives with us, and most people don't want their mother-in-law living with us, but we have this amazing relationship with mother-in-law. She's just like a really part of the family. And I think that's an amazing thing that we really have a close family unit. I said, great. What else is successful? Okay, well, we have this yard, and it's immaculate. And we all, as a family, work and have a different section. And we're going to win the yard of the month in our suburb. I said, what else you got successful? Well, every Wednesday and Sunday, I do ministerial work at my church, and I've dreamed about doing that since I'm 20, and I'm actually doing that. I'm getting to speak on Sunday and Wednesdays now, and I guess that's achievement. I said, great. Can you see in something that's extremely valuable to you, you're achieving in those areas? Yes. I said, the only reason why you think you're not successful is you're comparing yourself to somebody else that you think's got more success than you. Who is that? He says, I think I know. Well, who is that? He says, there's a doctor up on top of the hill. He's got a 6,000 square foot home and a 3-car garage. He's got a big practice. He does extremely well. And I guess I'm comparing myself to him. I said, do you know him very well? Yes. Well, do you know his relationship about him and his wife? He said, yes. How's his relationship with his wife? He says, well, that's a good question. They are volatile. They get together and divorce and they get married again. And it's crazy. It's insane. I said, so right now what you're saying is that he's very successful in his business, but he's got a rocky relationship. Oh, yes. And what about, does he have kids? Yes. You have a son? Yes. What about his relationship with his son? Yeah, they're having problems with him. He's doing drugs. He's not wanting to go to school. And he's pretty wild because he's not got any supervision hardly. I said, and what about the yard? They've got people to take care of the yard. I don't think they even notice their yard. And what about the mother-in-law? Well, they moved out of the country to get away from that crazy lady. And what about church services? Is he involved in the church in any way? He goes, no, he's not involved in that anyway. He's focused on his practice. I said, let me explain to you. That guy's not more successful than you. He has a different identity of success. He has a very high value on business and finance, but he doesn't have a high value on family and spirituality. You have a higher value on family and spirituality than you do on business and finance. You're not less successful, you just have a different form of success. But the second you compare yourself to somebody who has a different hierarchy of values, you're going to beat yourself up in comparison. You'll be a cat trying to swim like a fish and not honoring who you are. So you're not less successful. You just have a different form of success. And he probably envies you for your ability to have a relationship and your relationship with your child. He said, I never thought about that, but I can see that now. He said, but I'd still like to be able to make a little bit more cash. I said, well, what we can do is we can shift the values and we can link building a business and finances to the values that you have today and raise it up and integrate it and empower it more. But I just want you to know that you're not missing anything. At the level of the essence of your own soul, the authentic you, nothing's missing in you. But the level of the existence of your existential senses, things appear to be missing in you because you compare yourself to other people and think you're too proud or too humble to admit what you see in others inside you. And as long as you're not honoring what you see out there inside you, you're going to sit there and be distracted by trying to change others into you or you into others, which is futile, instead of honoring the magnificence of yourself. So I gave him some tips. And we increased his practice a bit. But he was not interested in being like the other guy completely once he got that. And he started to set goals that matched his own values. Either you set goals that match your own values or change your values to match your goals. But if there's no congruency in there, you have conflict and comparisons. So you got to give yourself permission to be you. The magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies you'll impose on yourself of being somebody else. Why be second at somebody else when you can be first at being you? I have no desire to be anybody else. I was asked by Vogue magazine, they did an interview on Vogue magazine. There's 17 questions they hit me with. And we get down to the last question. Now, Dr. DeMartini, if there's anybody in the world that you wish you could be, who could that be? And I thought, what a weird fucking question. Why would I want to be anybody but me? I said, I have no desire to be anybody but me. Moi. I want to be me. Oh, you're the first one that answered that. Why would you want to be somebody else? Why don't you give yourself permission to be the most magnificent you can be and do something extraordinary on planet Earth?
Everybody take a deep breath in. Breathe out. John, I wanted to ask you, one of the questions that we had was, what is the number one obstacle or thing that has the capacity to either prevent or facilitate intelligence from being expressed? What is the number one obstacle or thing that has the capacity to either prevent or facilitate intelligence being expressed?
In the chiropractic philosophy, there was universal intelligence, innate intelligence, and educated intelligence. Do you all remember those terms? Yes, no?
Yes. John, before you finish the sentence, it's interesting. As you start answering, I turned the cards, and the next question is, and because the direction you're going is, how does the chiropractic adjustment change a person? Was the follow-on question. So I'll just leave you there.
Good. All right. I wrestled with that over the years, being a student of philosophy and thinking. So just kind of bear with me on this one and try to follow it. I mentioned this last night, so some of you that heard some of this last night, if you don't mind hearing it again, raise your hand if you've ever been infatuated with somebody and enamored with somebody and drawn and attracted to somebody and perceive them having more advantages and disadvantages, more positives and negatives, and more attractive than repulsive. Yes? And then in that moment, when you first meet them and you get the little blood flow circulation changes, you're conscious of their upsides and unconscious of their downsides. How many would agree? Yep. You're assuming that there's more positive and negative. This one's different. How many know what I'm talking about? This one's different. This is the real thing. I found that one thing. Yeah? And then, so you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides. And then a day goes by, a week goes by, a few weeks go by, months go by, and how many would agree that you gradually be introduced to some of the things you overlooked initially and discovered that they're really, they have both sides. Okay? Now you can have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process and take time to see that, or you can have the wisdom of the ages without the aging process by looking right away and looking for what are those downsides that you're about to face that you're blind to. When you're blind and unconscious and ignorant of the downsides, you'll be broadsided by them over time, won't you? You'll find out that's not what you thought. And you've also met people that you resented initially, and you were conscious of the downsides and unconscious of the upsides, and you eventually discovered that, oh, well, they turned out to be not who I thought, and I discovered some of the upsides to these individuals. As long as you're seeing positives without negatives or negatives without positives, you're not seeing what's actually there. you have a subjectively biased interpretation of reality. And that subjective biased interpretation of reality will create an autonomic response, a parasympathetic or sympathetic seeking or avoiding emotional reaction. And anything that occupies space and time in your mind, which is an infatuation or resentment, it runs your mind. Have you been so infatuated somebody you couldn't sleep at night, or so resentful you couldn't sleep at night? So you have noise in the brain and you're preoccupied by whatever you have an imbalanced perspective about. And that's because of moral hypocrisies that you've been inundated by from religions or politics or mothers or fathers or preachers or teachers about how you're supposed to be. You're a child, you're told be nice, don't be mean, be kind, don't be cruel, be positive, don't be negative, be one-sided. And so if they are one-sided, you're attracted to them. If you see the other side, you're repelled from them, and therefore you're run by these misinterpretations. But if you get to know the individual, you'll find that they have both sides. So why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process when you can ask the questions and become aware cognitively of both sides? If you see both sides simultaneously, you see what's actually there. Now, educated intelligence is moral hypocritically driven perceptions and expectations that we've been taught by society about how you're supposed to be that is not how people are. That's the educated intelligence. The idea you're supposed to be one-sided. Raise your hand if you ever beat yourself up because you thought you were the other side than what you thought you should be. And then you beat yourself up and built yourself with pride when you're happy to be that way and then shame when you're not. And you end up bipolar. And anytime you're proud or shamed, you're not authentic. You're exaggerating or minimizing yourself instead of being yourself. So the educated intelligence is the moral hypocrisies and the emotional polarities that we've been imposed on, that we've accepted and subordinated to without actually questioning. As Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said, it's not that we don't know so much, we know so much that isn't so. But innate is a homeostatic mechanism that Wilhelm I in 1896, who was around at the time of DD, said were called simultaneous contrasts. When you simultaneously see both sides of people, you see them for who they are. When you infatuate with somebody, you don't know who they are. When you resent somebody, you don't know who they are. But when you love somebody, you know who they are. When you see both sides simultaneously, you have tears of gratitude and you feel love for somebody. In that moment, when you embrace both sides, how many agree that if you're married, after a while you see that they got things you like and dislike? You have both sides. That's when you love somebody. When you actually love somebody and you see both sides simultaneously and you embrace them and you see both of them are necessary, because the parts that supported your values made you juvenilely dependent, the parts that challenged you made you precociously independent, and the two together made you balanced and made you grow maximally. When you do that, you now have innate intelligence. Innate intelligence is the simultaneity of all complementary opposites designed like a magnet to be inseparable in the human mind. In that moment, innate is now homeostatically bringing wellness to you. And that's the universal intelligence. Innate is just a subset of anything that's alive that's basically in a constrained space and time domain that basically is part of the universal intelligence. The universal intelligence is the perfect symmetry of the universe. And the intelligence, the term intelligence, according to William James, is basically the pursuit of something meaningful and purposeful in life. And life is teleological in that respect. It has some meaning and purpose that we put onto things. It's not a meaningless universe when human beings come in and they add meaning to their life. And the difference between an animal and a human is the ability to go not for just pleasure and avoid pain, but to have meaning and to find the mean between the two polarities simultaneously. So that's innate intelligence. That's part of universal intelligence. And that is homeostatic and brings wellness. And when a chiropractor is in that state of awareness, it's impossible for them not to bring healing to people. Because there's a magnetic attraction of any human being on the planet that's looking for being around people that are authentic and in a state of love. Jim Parker called it the love concept. In that state of equanimity, you have presence. You have what I call the 6 transcendentals. You're grateful for your life. You love for what you're doing. You're inspired by the vision. You're enthusiastically working. You're certain about your skill, and you're present while you're doing your adjustment. And it's impossible to do those 6 transcendentals without having transformation in that human being that's sitting there on your table. Impossible. Because innate intelligence knows how to heal. And the second you're in that state, they come to that state. And they're not distracted by the judgments in themselves or the judgments of external contrast. They're present. And that's magnificent. And that's the power of healing consciousness. And that is the intelligence, the real purposeful intelligence that we have access to. But we get just sidetracked. We get sidetracked by all of the moral hypocrisies that are used to disempower people, to make them controllable by the organizations that are using them. Porphyry in the 3rd century, Neoplatonic philosopher, talked about how they were used by Christianity to give a moral ideal that nobody can live by, that would then make them feel ashamed because they can't live up to it. I'm not perfect yet, nobody's perfect yet. But the truth is the perfection is already in your life. The gentleman that thought he wasn't successful already had a perfection in his life, but it was not acknowledged because he was doing contrasts and comparisons. And as long as we compare ourselves to other people, we're not going to see the magnificence and the order that's in our own life. And we judge that. And we hold ourselves back from the magnificence. So innate is doing what it can to bring order. Claude Shannon and 2 other guys who got a Nobel Prize talked about in information theory that disorder means missing information. So if you're conscious of one and unconscious of the other, that unconscious is missing information. But if you're conscious of both sides simultaneously, you have what a Buddhist would call a mindful state, a bodhisattva state, an illuminated state, a moksha state, a non-bonded state. You're not attached to the infatuation, resentments, and the impulses and instincts that distract you from being present. And in that state, you have healing consciousness. In that state, you have power. That state, you're authentic. Because if you're putting people on pedestals and minimizing yourself, you're inauthentic. If you're putting people down and looking up and exaggerating yourself, you're inauthentic. You don't have sustainable fair exchange. When you puff yourself up, you get narcissistic and expect others to live in your values. And that destroys your practice when you expect them to do what you expect instead of meeting people in a nice fair exchange. But the moment you're authentic, you communicate a caring manner, not careless or careful, but a caring manner, and you communicate what you value in terms of what other people value, respect them, and you now have magnificent impact on the world because there's not stopping you, and you're authentic. And everybody wants to be around somebody that's authentic. How many would agree? They want to be around somebody that's living authentically, and they're inspired by what they're doing and exemplifying what's humanly possible. Einstein said the greatest teacher is exemplification. So the intelligence of the universe permeates it. Einstein, in one of his quotes, he said, "It's enough for me on a daily basis to sit in meditation and contemplate the intelligence that permeates the universe." In my idea of God, I'm not dealing with anthropomorphic deities made out of our own phobias and philias that are protecting us from our anxieties, but an acknowledgement of the magnificent order that's ever present, that's basically guiding life and helping us fulfill great genius and expression. So that's the innate or universal intelligence expressed through our physical form. And how do we live that? By asking the quality questions to see both sides of an event and not let the moral hypocrisies that we've been trained by educated individuals that are not fully aware dictate our thinking processes. In other words, not fitting into the culture, traditions, and conventions and mores of the past and giving ourselves permission to create something original in the future. We can't create something original unless we're authentic. I don't know if that answered the question. If you want a copy of everything I said, he wrote it all down.
Good. Are you guys learning something? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yes, you may. Yeah. John, you ask a question? Yeah. Can I have another microphone?
Based on what you were saying there, if you are bringing to the table that level of energy and that level of resonance with the universe, then, and as you absolutely, I agree with you 100%, say that it brings that person up to that level and brings a sense of healing to that person because they become more homeostatically balanced because of your presence. Yes. Where then lies the value of the adjustment?
It's a great question.
I love that question. Okay. I'm an etymologist. Let's take a look at the word adjustment. Add. Adductors, move to center. Abductors, move away from center. Add, just, balance. Ment, mind. Adjustment, bring the mind into center and balance. If you infatuate, you're not centered. You're minimizing you relative to somebody you put on a pedestal. If you're resentful, you're not centered. You're exaggerating you and putting somebody down in a pit. When you're looking down on somebody, you're too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you. In biblical New Testament, Romans 2:1, it says that beware, for ye who judges is judging themselves, for you do the same thing. Whatever we see in others is a reflection of what we see in ourselves. We only resent people that remind us of parts of ourselves we're ashamed of, that we're avoiding them because they're reminding of us, because we're, with our amygdala, addicted to avoid our shame and seek our pride. We want to feel our pride. But at the same time, when we're proud, we're looking at somebody that's reminding us of a part of ourselves we're admiring in ourselves that we're too proud or too humble to admit we have. So as long as we're judging somebody, we're disowning parts in ourselves, and that disowned part is an empty void which loses our power in healing consciousness. Healing consciousness is a state of consciousness when you have pure reflective awareness, when you're present with somebody. One with a bone, as Sisyphus used to say. And when you're there, the adjustment takes care of itself. You don't even have to make it a thrust. How many of you have been so present that the adjustment just did it while your hands were about setting up? And they just, when you're present, there's no effort that's involved. It's the most effective and efficient state. And the mass of that, that's why the practice gives you feedback. All the symptoms in your practice is a feedback to let you know when you're not being authentic. And the second you're in the flow and authentic, and you're in the zone, if you will, you're in tune, on time, and on target with being, on your mission. How many of you notice the telephones ring, the people come in, people who weren't even scheduled show up? I mean, things start to magically happen. So the universe rewards you by being authentic, by being inspired, by being grateful, by being loving. That's a universal principle that we can't defy. But the adjustment is not only a physical adjustment, which is taking a luxation or a dislocation or a micro dislocation and putting it back in proper position, but it's a state of mind. Now, subluxation, lux means light in physics. I was in Egypt just a couple weeks ago and went to Luxor. Lux meant light, the city of light. And if you study lux, it means lumens per steradian, or lumens per square meter. That's its definition, which means the illumination, the intensity of photons per square meter, or per square steradian if you deal with radians in a collimated circle. The intensity of that light. So that's the intelligence. We could use that as an enlightened intelligence. To the degree that we have enlightened intelligence, we bring order. But subluxation, ation means a condition of, sublux means less than the full expression of light and intelligence expressed to the body. Therefore, educated intelligence, which causes you to judge, which causes you not to be enlightened and fully awakened in the bodhisattvic state, then you automatically are subluxating the healing power. So the moment you're in a judging state, how many of you know when you had stinking thinking, ingratitude, attitude, pity party, hold drum, doldrum, your stars are scars, you're in emotional state, you have digital craniorectilitis syndrome, where your thumb is in your mouth, your head is up your ass, right? When you're in that state, how many of you notice that the practice isn't flowing? But how many of you know when all of a sudden you get centered again and get back into the zone again, and then all of a sudden things start to work and it goes fluently? Your patients give you feedback to try to get you back into the zone. How many of you learned that when certain people come in, you know you must be having a stinking thinking day because they don't show up except on those days? And other people, when they come in, you know you're on highs. You're resonating very high energy. So You are tracked in your clients where you're playing in the field. And so adjustment, now here's the thing that I learned, and your technique is not where all the power is.
Yeah.
Your technique just determines who's going to come and see you. Your technique just determines who's going to see you. But your gratitude for service, your love for what you're doing, when you're inspired by the vision you have as a healer, you're enthusiastically working, you're certain about your skills, and you're present with the patient, really present with the patient, that's what makes your practice grow. Your technique is just going to determine who's going to come see you. But your volume is not based on your technique. People think it's about the technique, but the technique is a vehicle that filters out people in the environment to get the people that resonate with that technique. So the adjustment is as much a mental state as it is a physical state. It's both. And you want to honor both. It's a somatic, psychic, somatic. It's a combination of that. Because you could take a machine and go and tap vertebrae in various spots, and you will get an impact, without a doubt. But you put a human who's present with that doing that same action, and you will have a way more powerful impact. Way more powerful impact. Now, can an adjustment, maneuvering a bone, change the compression and tension on the bone and the compression and tension on the musculature of the bone and cause piezoelectrical influence and change the electronics of nerve conduction and change the vasculature, dilation or constriction of vasculature and cause kinesiopathology and physiopathology? Absolutely. And can you actually going in there and adjusting a subluxation physically impact that and even impact nerve conduction, nerve impulses, and epigenetic changes in transcription of DNA and down to the subtle level? Absolutely. But you put the psychology and that together and you now have a powerful transformation in human beings' lives. Because you put those two together, they work as a team. I don't think we need to separate those two. I think we need to realize that they're congruent. When you're actually present, they become congruent. And your efficiency of your delivery of your adjustment is most profound if you're present. I did experiments with adjusting many years ago in the 80s. And I found out that the doctors that drew and magnetized patients developed a style. So if you've never videotaped yourself and developed a unique style, I can encourage you to consider that. It will grow your practice if you do. And I watched chiropractors that had higher volume, and I noticed a pattern in the way they delivered the adjustment. It wasn't sloppy. It was crisp. It was concise. It was present. And they had a style, and you were magnetized to them. So what I did is I went into this doctor's office somewhere in the United States, and he had an open clinic. This is the beginning of the late 80s when the open clinics were starting to happen. And so the people were watching him. If they were reading something or not paying attention, he wasn't engaged in his adjusting. But if he's engaged in his adjusting, everybody is staring and watching. They cannot not watch him adjust. They're drawn to him. So I walk in and I'm looking at him adjusting, and I'm watching. Nobody's watching him. So I said, at lunch we're going to talk about how you adjust. And I had one of his assistants come in and said, "Can you see they're not watching him? There's no magnetism to him. They don't want to see that. There's nothing wow about his adjustments. We're going to put some wow factor in there. There's a sizzle in this thing." So the way we positioned himself, the way we set him up, the way we made the adjustment, we did the same thing he was doing, but now with a presence. and made him go in and imagine the bone, and then looking at the trabecular pattern of the bone, and then looking at the collagen molecules and down into the atoms and getting really present with it, and then doing a very quick adjustment, very efficient adjustment. In the afternoon, I had the assistant come out and I said, now watch what they're doing. Notice how they're not looking at their newspaper, they're not reading a magazine, they're not wondering what's going on and closing their eyes or whatever. All of them are glued to him now because he's now got a style. The referrals will be proportionate to your magnetism, the way you present that adjustment. If this was the most important moment of your life and you're about to adjust the most important individual in your life, and it was a life and death threatening situation and you were really, really present with it, and you knew you were going to have a massive impact by giving this adjustment, there's a magnetism when you make that adjustment that people want to watch. And when they want to watch you, they want to refer to you. So develop a style. Sit down and watch each other and develop a style. There was a guy that was at Parker Seminar, this Afro-American guy that had this huge practice. And I used to watch him out in the hallways because he'd adjust people in the hallways. And he was unbelievable to watch. And he'd gather 60, 80, 100 people watching him. Anytime you'd be out there adjusting, they'd all come and gather around him. And I was watching, why isn't there they're gathering in? The other guy's going at just 2 tables over, nobody's watching him. This guy's got 100 people watching. Why has this guy got nobody watching him? This guy's kind of just going through a routine, sloppily going through routine and not being precise. Adjustment specific, I think B.J. Palmer called it. That's why BJ was making sure that they really did the toggle really exactly a certain way, because he knew that was a magnetism pulling people to it. So contemplate your style and videotape it and look at it and then gather people around, and if they're not watching it, if they're not glued to it, somehow you're not present. Because the moment you're present, there's a magnetic field that draws them to you. Really get present in the style and develop a style that's unique to you that nobody else has. It will make a difference.